Hey, how's everyone doing? Welcome to my Final Fantasy Type 0 HD review. Type 0 was a game that was originally released only in Japan for the PSP way back in 2011, so the original game is pretty old. It wasn't until the HD port in 2015 by Hexadrive and Square Enix that it was released overseas in the West. I would like to emphasize the part where I mentioned PSP and port, because I did take this into consideration when forming my opinions as I played through the game. In other words, I was very lenient. So with that in your head, let's take a look at how this game has aged. I'll start off with what everyone's probably thinking. Yes, this game looks dated. It's 2018 and you've all probably already experienced the joy that is Final Fantasy 15, so going backwards can take a little adjusting. The character models aren't very smooth during cutscenes, except for the rendered scenes. Everything looks a bit blocky, such as the character's hair, the textures on their clothing, and most obvious of all, their hands in those really close-up shots. But I just want you guys to keep in mind that the game was made for the PSP, so the look will remain mostly consistent with what was shown there, but obviously a bit better and scaled. Unfortunately, they can't fix the fact that no one can apparently make a fist or smooth out everything, but that's just how it goes. Even so, I'm not one of those people who need stellar graphics to play a game. I could go back and play The Legend of Dragoon or Final Fantasy VII right now with those really ugly polygon character models and not have an issue. The game still looks acceptable taking all things into consideration, but for those people who care deeply about the way the game looks, there are some additional things that I've noticed that bothered me at the beginning, but I was able to look past. Besides the stretched textures on doors and other environments and assets during a few parts of the gameplay, there will also be a handful of cutscenes that have a tint which appears to be caused by lighting effects or fog in the background. Combined with motion blur, this can ruin the colors a bit, but again, I think this is an easy thing to adjust to. Rewatching the opening scene again for the 5th time was still awesome, even though I noticed the tint and motion blur. During actual gameplay, the character models actually looked more detailed than some of the models used in the cutscenes, and most levels actually look pretty good. You'll quickly forget about those blocky hands while you look at the visual effects of machines falling apart or when summoning your favorite deities of the Final Fantasy universe. I mean, look at Bahamut, he still looks like a badass dragon. The story takes place in a world called Orience, with 4 countries each having their own crystal. The protagonists are a group of 14 students enrolled in an academy called Academia and are part of a special elite class called Class 0. Oh, and we have some sort of war engulfing the land too. I was actually pleasantly surprised at how much I liked the story by the end of it, although I will say this. I'm starting to think I'm a sucker for stories that involve war. I won't go into spoilery details, but I liked what they did with the direction and growth of the characters and how the lore in the world comes together. This was especially surprising since the story was very confusing in the beginning and came together somewhat poorly due to how the story hides cutscenes and missions from you on your first playthrough. Not to mention some cutscenes that contain important information is only shown in the Rubicus. I will never understand why developers or writers choose to split the story up through multiple playthroughs, but it sucks. Stop it. They did show me enough to get the answers I wanted, but then I had even more questions, forcing me to play another round from the beginning. They touched on themes that I found really interesting about living life and in turn death. Cliché, I know, but it was good. The story is probably the darkest I've seen in Final Fantasy and has more blood in it than any other. I think this worked out very well in their favor. There are a lot of characters in this game that you can get to know, which I think usually ends up hurting the game overall since it restricts the time each character gets for development, but in Type 0's case, it turned out mostly fine. The protagonists were believable in their actions and personalities, although some were a bit cliche, like 9 being a dumb musclehead. There were conflicts between them, but there was also a bond that developed as the game went on. I grew attached to quite a few characters as individuals and also the group as a whole. Some characters did get more screen time and development than others, but it feels like everyone was shown enough where they didn't seem useless. Side characters were also great, even though they weren't important in the least to the main story. Regardless, Kazusa and Emina were my 2 favorite side characters since they had very amusing scenes and personalities.
No more jokes.
Having 14 characters to play is great since it provides you with a wide range of fighting styles to choose from. Each character has a unique weapon and also has their own unique attack, so no character feels redundant. Since you can only bring 3 characters into battle at a time, you'll most likely have a handful of favorites and end up ignoring the rest. Personally, I only used Rem, Trey, Jack, Queen, and Seiss. For those who want to use all their characters, there is kind of a catch-up mechanic which gives you experience by taking classes, secret training, or you can just grind out the previous missions, which isn't difficult. Players are also able to summon what this game refers to as Eidolons, but it's just your normal summons like Bahamut, Shiva, or Ifrit. By sacrificing your controlled character, you can then control these amazing Eidolons and completely destroy your enemies. It's really fun going around as Odin and swinging his giant sword just to see all your enemies drop at once. Even some bosses are no match for his mighty strength. This also gives those other unused characters some value as summon fodder. Gameplay consists of two components: combat, which is great, fun, and challenging, and free time, which occurs between missions and is where the annoying part comes in, especially for people who don't know what to expect. Type 0 is an action RPG, so fighting is done in real time. There is also some strategy minigames occasionally mixed in there. Combat occurs during random encounters on the world's map. Yep, that's still a thing. And when exploring dungeons and invading towns during missions in the main story. When invading towns or exploring dungeons, the map is made up of small areas that contain enemies, items, and maybe some obstacles. They're kinda like rooms since they're not very big, and you don't spend much time in one area. You traverse the level by moving between these areas to the area where your objective is located. Between the level design and the combat, this probably won't be something that will bother you since load times are usually pretty quick and each area is pretty distinctive with new enemies and objectives. What makes the game challenging is the combination of having 14 characters while also not typically sharing experience, causing you to be under-leveled. This isn't an issue with story missions as they are typically easy as long as you don't start on Akito difficulty, which makes enemies 30 levels higher. Instead, we have something called Expert Missions, which has its recommended level starting off around level 47, while your characters are sitting around level 20 if you're lucky. This is where most of the challenge is. That doesn't mean it's impossible though. Thanks to something called break sight and kill sights, killing higher level enemies can be perfectly manageable, although this is where the challenge comes in, as one mishap and you're dead. Break and kill sights function and act the same way, except you get a kill sight when that enemy will die with the next attack. These attacks are counterattacks that cause massive amounts of damage. Each enemy will have different points in which these breakpoints will appear. Some occur as the attack animation starts up, some have it in the middle of the attack, and others have it at the end of an attack. Playing through the game and figuring out the battle strategy lets all the battles be interesting as you have to pay attention and makes the fight more exciting. Type 0 also has another gameplay mechanic that adds more fun and rewards when running through missions called Special Orders. These are completely optional tasks that the player can do in order to earn better rewards they can't get anywhere else. Tasks consist of a variety of different orders such as take no damage for 2 minutes, land a kill site, or kill someone with magic. The really cool thing about Special Orders is that it actually ties into the endgame, which I won't go into because spoilers. Type 0 also has a real-time strategy minigame, which I think is mostly optional, except for maybe one mandatory mission, but does contain some really good rewards and is very enjoyable. I really like RTS games, so this was definitely a good fit for me, not to mention it fits in with the setting of war. So the minigame works like this: you control one character in a region on the world map with the task to take over the enemy bases or towns. You control the flow and types of troops from some towns while others are automatic. To capture towns, you have to invade it after your troops take down the defenses, which will take you to the normal mission gameplay you're used to. So you basically have to decide which battles to reinforce and how to go about taking the required base to complete your objective. This was actually one of the hardest parts of the game, as my characters were very underleveled and couldn't really take a beating, so I had to use certain strategies to complete the mission. The worst part of gameplay is the time management. Now this isn't an issue in games like Persona because you can actually do everything in one playthrough if you manage your time well. In Type 0, all activities will take up your precious and limited time in your first playthrough. Each character event will take 2 hours, leaving the academy will take 6 hours, and doing an expert trial will take 12 hours. In the beginning you only have about 12 hours per break, and by the end of the game you'll have somewhere around 80 plus hours. But that's still not enough if you want to do everything. There will also be tasks given to you by certain NPCs in academia which may require you to leave, netting you a 6-hour loss if you don't know how to maximize your time outside. Of course, this isn't an issue if you don't care about seeing everything, but moving to the next chapter without talking to everyone definitely left a bad taste in my mouth. If you do leave academia, there is a decently large world to explore with numerous dungeons, although each region will have at most only 3 towns. You can actually take your time exploring, as the time deduction doesn't occur until after you return. As you progress further in the game and complete certain missions, more regions will become unlocked, giving you access to more dungeons, towns, and tasks. There is a lot to do here, and unfortunately it's not something you can really enjoy on the first playthrough, as a lot of the dungeons contain very high level creatures, and even lock behind a third playthrough. The music in Type 0 is superb. Final Fantasy always has some good soundtracks, and Type 0 keeps that trend going. Kor's vocals are a very good choice for video game music, as it adds a lot more emotion to gameplay and cutscenes. I think hearing a human voice really connects the player with the game. The music was improved on compared to the PSP music, since it originally had to work within the PSP limitations. Takeharu Ishimoto, the guy who did the music for Type 0, put more emphasis on the vocals this time around, and man, he really did a good job. I especially fell in love with the theme song by Bump of Chicken called Zero. When I heard it in the introduction cinematics, I knew I was going to listen to this song a lot. Zero had a sad sounding melody, which fits with the game's ambience, but the lyrics also fit with the theme of the game, and it was incorporated in such a way that it makes the associated scenes much more emotional. I definitely have some new favorite songs to listen to after playing Type 0. Final Fantasy Type 0 may have been released a long time ago, but overall the HD remakes looks fine on today's hardware. I mean, it's nowhere close to the games we have now, but that's expected. There are some minor blemishes, but I think most people should be able to look past that and enjoy the game for its fun and fast-paced battle system and story. I did do a fair amount of compromises, like having to ignore events that I didn't have time to do, or not being able to explore dungeons on the first playthrough, but as long as you come in expecting this, it's less of a blow to your expectations. The game has a lot of potential to be greatly enjoyed by not only Final Fantasy fans, but JRPG fans in general if given the chance. Just know that nothing will seem to make sense at first, and you'll have millions of questions. You might even get a bit frustrated at the time management system, but if you just take in what the game gives you, and take your time knowing that you'll get to do the stuff you miss later, it should make your experience a lot more pleasant. There is a big world to explore, a great deal of interesting lore to learn, and a lot of challenges to be had. So yes, this game is a good game to play. If someone didn't ask me to review this game, I would have never played it a second time, and actually get the chance to appreciate it. So thank you, Victor. As always, thank you guys for watching. I hope this review was helpful. I probably have a pretty unpopular opinion about the game, so let me know how you guys feel if you've played it. If you haven't, feel free to give your impressions anyway. With that said, I'll see you guys next time.